We have to have a wake-up call that our lifestyle is killing us. We have this chronic disease epidemic, and when I say chronic disease, I'm talking about heart disease, diabetes, cancer, arthritis, dementia. And so our health is impacted by so many lifestyle effects. Sleep, food, physical activity, stress, digestive health. So your health is your wealth, and if companies really want to gain maximum wealth, there is a need to focus on the health of the employees. I have spoken at major conferences, small lunch and learn company groups, school districts, financial companies. Stress shows up differently in different organizations. So every company has a different culture, a different language, a different way that they want me to present. My presentations are usually very animated because I love to teach people through demonstration. I use a lot of teachable tools to really demonstrate my topics. When I come in and talk about productivity, what I'm really doing is help people optimize their mental and physical well-being so that they can have maximal productivity in the workplace. Hello. So I rounded up for the day, yes, and I have a little accent, so people tell me. I come from the land down under, but I live in Southern California now, so just know that that's where my accent comes from. And one of my favorite sayings ever is, and you might have heard this before, if the only prayer you ever say in your life is thank you, then that is enough. And I want to start today with two thank yous. First of all, thank you from every resident and intern that never said thank you to you for saving our butts those first 2 years. So I went to medical school in Sydney, Australia, and this is me in the 80s. And I was working in intensive care, and I had no idea what to do. And you know, you've been there. You've saved many residents and interns in their first year. So I say thank you on behalf of them. And the other thank you that I want to give is for your empathy and your compassion and the amazing work that you do. And I learned about compassion from my mom. This is a picture of my mom at 90. In Australia, we would say she's as healthy as an ox. No medications, no eyeglasses, and she was called the mayor of her aged care center because she knew everyone and everyone knew her, and she knew everything about everybody. And I left Australia 27 years ago to marry the love of my life, who happened to be American, and he happens to be here today. And we celebrated 26 years this year. And so my daughter, our daughter, is half Australian. So every year of her life, I would take her back to Australia. So she knew her grandma and grandparents, and she knew what it was like to be Australian. And then about a couple of years ago, I got that call that you never want to get. And it's my sister who still lives in Australia. And she said, Karen, Mum's had a fall, and I think you need to come. So, of all things, she was spraying fly spray. We have a lot of flies in Australia. Fly spray in her bathroom, and she fell. She slipped on the fly spray. And so that night, I was on a Qantas plane to Brisbane, 14 hours. Anyone been to Australia? Yes, it's a grueling flight, right? I'm pretty used to it now, but it's a long flight. Straight to the hospital to see my mom in a very different place. And my sister and I spent a week at her bedside, and I am here to just thank the nursing staff for what I would call sacred encounters. I don't know if you use that term, but that's the term that I use of our time of meeting nurses that came, different shifts. I will never see them again, of course, but they became part of our family, and they allowed my sister and I to have this beautiful ending to my mom, and she passed with grace and peace and dignity, and I am so grateful. So a huge thank you for the work that you do. And in the work that I have done in my life, I've often considered this word vocation. And the word vocation comes from a word that means a voice. It's not something, especially in the healing professions, it's not something that we choose to do as a goal. It's a calling that we hear. It's a calling. And there is a book, I even brought it with me because it's a book that's really meant a lot to me in all the iterations of my career in the healing profession. And it's by, I think I have a picture here for you. It's by Parker Palmer. And it's called Let Your Life Speak. Listening to the voice of vocation. And there's a particular phrase that I go to regularly in that book when I want to remember my big why of why I do the work I do in service. And I wanted to share that with you. It might resonate and help you. Your vocation in life is where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. I just love that. And we are so fortunate in the healing professions to be meeting the world's greatest need. What did we just experience in this incredible precision medicine that we just saw? The world needs what we do, clearly. And when our joy and our desire to be of service meets the world's greatest need, that's when we are truly living our highest calling. Yet, giving, and being compassionate and showing empathy is exhausting because you're giving all the time. And I love this saying, when your compassion does not include yourself, it's not complete. So today I get to give back to you. So this is this short amount of time we have at the end of today for you to be able to learn how to take care of you. And I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. I'm actually going to call on the power of our second brain. I'm sure you know what that is. And you've heard of this term, compassion fatigue. We've all heard of that. And I love this particular image of it because it's literally when the dial is empty. We've got nothing left because we've been giving, and we haven't been filling up. So I'm going to give you some, and of course I have a very short amount of time here with you, but I want to give you some ideas about how you can fill up. And without it completely changing your life and having to stop your life, because we've got work to do. We've got a job, we've got a very demanding life. So I want to make sure that I give you some tools that you really apply straight away. And I know with compassion fatigue, we don't often want to talk about it or hear about it because we've got work to do. And it can kind of freeze us sometimes in, is this really happening? But we have to address it because you know, you can only give, and if you keep giving, then something's going to show up in your body. Your body speaks to you through symptoms, and if we can listen, then it can help guide us what we need to do to fill up. And you know the research about, as health professionals, the stress and exhaustion and overwhelm and depression and burnout and anxiety, and many of us use caffeine and sugar and alcohol just to get through the day. Well, I want to give you some tools. So, one of my favorite sayings is the road to good emotional and physical health is filled with good intestines. So, I have brought with me your second brain. Voila. So, here's your second brain. So this is your esophagus, of course, it's a very large stomach, just for the sake of the audience. And if I could have someone, could I ask you to take this end for me? Thank you. Take this end, and then walk all the way down the back of the room so we can see, all the way down there, this way, so we can see how big our intestine is. Now, I know many of you have seen this inside someone. Oh, and sometimes that happens. Here we go. So we all have an intestine this long, about 25 feet. And you know at this end what happens and how to tell how good your intestinal health is by what's coming out this end. And there's a simple term some people use called fluffy floaties or stinky sinkies, right? I have a medical audience here, so I don't have to describe what that means. But the truth is that this organ holds a key to our physical and emotional health. So I'm going to pull this back in here. Now, the other thing is amazing is that it sits inside us in all its 12s, and somehow, thank you, and somehow it's meant to work. It sits all in here. So, you know, I think I got a picture of the Bristol stool chart. So, I'm amazed how many people don't know about the Bristol stool chart, and I'm going to show you a picture of that in a second. But this gut, and I don't remember learning about this in medical school, but 70 to 80% of our immune system is in our gut. So when you think about that and think about the work that you do, that you're exposed to all kind of things that come through the door, possible bugs, if 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut, then we better have good digestive health to boost our immune system. And 80 to 90% of serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter, the neurotransmitter that helps us stay optimistic and concentrate and even helps us sleep, is also located in the gut. And then we have our whole enteric nervous system, which you know about, that is considered our second brain. So everything we think and feel is felt by the gut. So we've got some work to do to keep our gut as healthy as possible. And we don't give it a whole lot of attention. So here is the Bristol stool chart. I love this chart. I have one of these laminated, so when I see people, I ask them to tell me if they're 1 through 7. And because people don't like to talk about this, right? They don't like to be, talking about their poop. But the key is, I'm not going to know how someone's digestive health is unless we actually know what's happening. So the ideal stool is like a overripe banana that is brown and soft and mushy and curved, and it comes out really easily. So that's the ideal. And then you have the hard, craggy, kind of constipated lumps, number 1, which is probably dehydration, or stress, lots of causes of very hard stool, or the liquidy stool that's an indication that some inflammation going on. And I can't tell you how valuable it has been for me to be able to have that Bristol stool chart and just have people tell me. And then often when I speak to a lay audience who's never heard of the Bristol stool chart, can't believe how many people tell me that they don't poop for 4 days. Like 4 days, it's not unusual at all. But nobody's really talked to them about it, so we get to have a conversation about good digestive health. And then everyone asks me what the normal transit time is from mouth to anus, and 12 to 24 hours is ideal. But for most people, that's not the case, especially not with the processed food that we eat and the stress and no time to drink water. So the Institute of Functional Medicine is so interesting to see the links now between digestive health and overall health. And we are seeing what we would call separate conditions that we wouldn't necessarily see a commonality. Skin issues often are demonstrated from digestive issues. So our skin is the largest organ of the body. So good gut health is important for good skin health. And then emotional health, anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, has often got a digestive link. I'm not talking about a cause and effect. I'm talking about a link and a good question to ask and probe to look at if some of these symptoms are showing up. And so for you to be able to optimize your digestive health is so important to overall emotional and mental health. So a happy gut is a happy life, and we're going to be looking at what have you done for your gut lately. So I'm going to go through very briefly 7 second brain health tips for you. First one, obviously, what you put in your mouth matters, because your mouth takes in the food, and what we want to do is get as good a nourishment into that small intestine for absorption as possible. And the standard American diet, and often in Australia, it's interesting, SAD is the same, the standard Australian diet, the standard American diet. And it's not a very nice sight. And what do you notice about this picture? Like, brown, yellow, yes. Well, I've got a picture here. This is actually a trash dump. And I've superimposed what a lot of people might call food and a trash dump so you can see the similarity between the two. And we call that nourishment. We call that food. And of course, it's not. I don't know, the food manufacturing industry does a really good job of calling it food, but this is food. Alive, vibrant. I was so happy to see in your break. See all those veggies out there in the break? Very happy to see alive food. Every different color has different antioxidants and minerals to keep our cells alive. So the closer, someone said to me once, if the closer to nature we eat, the healthier it would be. Or when you're going to eat something, you ask the question, is this as nature would intended? I can't believe the supermarket aisles, the cereal aisles are getting bigger and bigger. Have you noticed? And the other day I saw a cereal box with a unicorn on the top, like an actual cute little toy. And it was right at about this level in the aisle where the kids are walking down, because all perfectly placed for marketing. And it's marketing obesity to children. And they get away with it. So my second tip is to reduce sugary food. And when you start to see the amount of sugar in some of these foods, and it's really surprising. I actually have, and I brought it here to show you here, this, which a lot of kids would drink, like a whole thing of this, 64 teaspoons of sugar in one of these. And why am I talking about sugar? Well, for many reasons. Sugar and the resultant increase in insulin creates inflammation of the body. Sugar is fattening. For a long time we were saying, oh, it's all about fat. Fat is fattening. But then we started to eat all these fat-free foods. Sugar is fattening. And it also creates a lot of dis-ease, inflammation in the body. And I'm going to talk a little more about this. Oh, and I have another little one here. Okay, so I've covered up the name, but it's pretty obvious to see what it is and how many teaspoons of sugar is in one of these. And it'd be so easy to get through one of these just sitting in a movie, right? Because this candy is pretty cool. But when you start to really look at sugar and start to really look at labels, it gets pretty scary where sugar is hidden in so many foods. So I like to, and I know this is really basic for this audience, but you might have family members too that you want to start to talk about why sugar has these devastating effects. So our blood sugar likes to be in a standard range, and by the way, I do a lot of health coaching, and I ask all of my clients to buy their own glucometer. Glucometer is not just for diabetics. Glucometers can help us know what reaction we have to certain foods and what our blood sugar level is, and it's very easy to buy one. So orange juice and a bagel would be a high glycemic breakfast. Up goes our blood sugar. And then, of course, insulin, that fat storage hormone, increases to bring the blood sugar down. And I know when you have got these long shifts that you're probably looking for things to give you energy that are probably higher glycemic. And so all day we're going up and down and up and down. And this graph not only represents blood sugar level, but it represents concentration, mood, energy, cravings. And so stabilizing your blood sugar by, and I'm going to give you some easy tips about how to do that. Eating protein and good slow carbs with every meal and snack is really, really valuable. Because the price we're paying for all this high glycemic food is toxic waste, because sugar is fattening, and then chronic illness like heart disease and diabetes, which is, personally, I'm on a mission to reduce the type 2 diabetes epidemic in children. Because what we've just described has everything to do with why we're seeing so much type 2. When I was in medical school in the 80s, that's a long time ago, type 2 was called adult onset. I wonder if many of you are too young to remember that, but we called it adult onset, and we can't do that anymore because more kids are getting type 2 than adults right now, and it has to do with lifestyle. And I'm very passionate. It's something we can actually do something about. And the United States of diabesity is where we're headed with this diet. And Dr. David Perlmutter, I don't know if you guys ever heard of him. He wrote a book called Grain Brain, and all about the results sugar on the brain, and also Brain Maker, which is about our microbiome and its impact on the brain. The New England Journal of Medicine published an article looking at the link between glucose and brain health, or dementia specifically, and the conclusion of the study was that higher glucose levels may be a risk factor for dementia, even people who don't have diabetes. And look at the blood sugar. The fasting blood sugar levels that impact our brain are things that when I was practicing I wouldn't have really worried about. 105 to 110. We think about 125 as being so-called diabetic. 105 to 110 we'd say, oh, well, what's your sugar? But this is having an impact on our brain. And so more and more research is in every area of medicine. This is just in neurology that we are looking at the impact of blood sugar. So what can you do? Take your snacks to work with you. Think about what I call slow carbs. The way I classify carbohydrates is fast, which is like cookies and candy. Just think way Halloween and think fast carbs. And slow carbs like veggies, like the things out there, and protein. And just have that available all the time so that you're not in that situation where your energy is slumped and you've got to go and get whatever's fast. Now, it's easy for me to say, oh, just do this. But there's a thing called sugar addiction. Who actually thinks that there's a thing called sugar addiction? Okay. Good. Because a lot of people haven't heard that term. There's a gal, and again, you have one of my little bookmarks. If you have any questions about what I'm talking about, I have lots of resources on my website, and you can always email me if you forget some of these names that I'm mentioning. But Kathleen Desmaisons has done some of the best work in sugar addiction, and she wants to wake people up. Sometimes sugar addiction looks like that. I just couldn't resist putting that picture in. It's just so cute. And she has this questionnaire. Now, if I asked you, well, do you think you have sugar addiction or not? You probably know. And the good news is it's not your fault. It's about biochemistry. And in her work, I think she has a website, radiantrecovery.com is her website. And she has a lot of information about the dopamine, serotonin connection to do with sugar addiction. But I just thought I would bring this quick little questionnaire. The more yeses you answer to this, the more likely you are to be what she calls sugar sensitive, which means sugar has a whole other impact on you to someone that is not sugar sensitive. So if there were warm chocolate chip cookies that were about to come into this room and they had just been cooked, you can probably, if you're sugar sensitive, you probably can smell them already and your taste buds are ready for that chocolate chip cookie. Whereas someone that just ate and is not sugar sensitive say, oh, I don't want that. There's a difference. So the more yeses. I really like sweets. I like bread, cereal, popcorn, pasta. People don't think of those as sugar, but they're sugar. And I have had an alcohol problem because Kathleen's work is so interesting that the brain pathway for alcoholism is very similar to the brain pathway for sugar addiction. And if ever you've been to an AA meeting, you'll see in the back of the room pastries, cookies, candy to help that part of the brain, substitute addictions. So it's so interesting when we start to realize, whoa, and I do stand before you as a recovering sugar addict. I will admit that. So this has been near and dear to my heart and to learning the techniques to help me stay in balance. Or your parents were sugar lovers. I remember my mom always had this candy. It's funny how American I've become, because we call it a lolly jar. In Australia, we don't use the word candy, but I've become so used to using that word. A lolly jar. She thought it was hidden, but we always knew where it was. And if ever we took any lollies out of that, we'd be sure to put them back. That was her like little stash. And she needed that. And I did notice that she would go to it at times of more emotional stress. I'm overweight and don't seem to be able to lose because nobody told us that sugar is fattening because of the insulin and then the cortisol that increases when your blood sugar drops, because the stress hormone cortisol is gluconeogenic. I love that word. Makes glucose to help us act in times of stress. And I continue to be depressed no matter what I do. Now this I'm going to talk a little about because the serotonin connection. Do you remember I talked about 80 to 90% of serotonin is made in your gut? And so if you have digestive issues and your serotonin is compromised, that can increase your cravings, especially if you're sugar sensitive, which comes back to the gut and having as healthy a gut as possible. And overreacting to stress, because serotonin is our stress shield. Balanced serotonin helps us take action without overreacting. And I know we don't do blood levels of serotonin, but when you become really familiar with your body, you know when you're out of balance because of overreacting to life. So I hope that's helpful to you. And Kathleen tells us that it's not just about saying no. It's an imbalance in two separate functionings. The low serotonin, most people that have sugar sensitivity have been on an antidepressant sometime in their life. So interesting. And low beta endorphin functioning, one of the best drugs ever made, I'm here to tell you, is the Krispy Kreme donut. It has the magic combination of sugar and fat, and then they serve it warm. And the warmth melts in your mouth to the point where you get this beta endorphin high. Now, why do they give you a free one when you walk in? Of course they do, because then we remember what that was like and we want to go back. So food is a drug, and food can be also our medicine. And it's just important to be aware. No judgment, just be aware of how you are responding. And with my clients that I work with sugar addiction, I help them with some natural serotonin boosters. So I'm not saying pharmaceuticals are bad. Of course not. It would be my dream that every time Paxil or Prozac was written, there'd be also a little script that had natural serotonin boosters as well to add to the efficacy. Because we know that things like eating protein with every meal and snack, you need tryptophan to make serotonin. So eating protein regularly throughout the day gives your body tryptophan, and then the carbohydrate, here's how the story goes. When I was taught this, it was so valuable. So I'm going to tell you the little story. Now this is how I teach people in a very simple way, that when you eat a protein, you get all these amino acids, and tryptophan is the runt of the amino acid litter. So the muscles don't want tryptophan. So when you take a carbohydrate at the same time as a protein, the insulin diverts the good amino acids to the muscle, and it leaves tryptophan all alone to run across the blood-brain barrier to make serotonin. Now, you could pull the science of that. I know there's all kinds of deep science that I could go into this, but the reason I teach people that is so that you think, okay, protein with every meal and snack. How can I get protein here? And when you go and have lunch at the hospital, your first thing you think about is protein and some kind of slow carb, some kind of vegetable with every meal and snack that will help you with your serotonin levels. Sunlight. We're lucky in Southern California, we get sunlight, but if you're working 12-hour shifts, you may not be getting a lot of sunlight. So you know about the full spectrum light bulbs that help make serotonin. Seasonal affective disorder that you see up in some of the northern states is from low serotonin. So you need to make sure you either get sunlight or full spectrum light. Exercise, one of the best ways to get serotonin and beta endorphins and many, many benefits of exercise. Any exercise, any practice that engages the parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxes you, prayer, any kind of mind-body practice that you do, boosts serotonin. Social connections. So being connected to each other, which of course you get a lot in your work and hopefully from each other in your day-to-day practices and your friends. Not the Facebook friend kind of social connection, but the true, authentic connections boost serotonin. Massage boosts serotonin. Probiotics, because 80 to 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. So you want to make sure your gut flora is really well balanced, which is one of the other keys that I have for the gut. And sleep, cycling of sleep. Sleep gets very forgotten as a major lifestyle practice, but the cycling of sleep helps boost serotonin. So I hope that gives you some tips about helping you look at how you can integrate practices, and of course you don't do them all at once. And the answer is, because some people also think carbs are bad. No, we need carbs. Our brain and body needs carbs. But it's the spiking that creates inflammation and imbalance in our body. And it's the kind and the amount that we eat. And we could talk way more. You can certainly, I have some great simple recipes. I am not a cook. If my mom knew that I had a thing called Karen's Kitchen on my website, she would be very amazed, because I'm not a cook. But I like to make simple things like cauliflower rice. Anyone made cauliflower fried rice? It's amazing, and I make it for guests, and people have no idea it's cauliflower. Cauliflower fried rice. I got a little recipe. I get all the ingredients from Trader Joe's. Simple. Spaghetti squash. Instead of spaghetti, you can get the fork, and so you get spaghetti. I love, cauliflower mashed potatoes. Like pho, I call it F-A-U-X, mashed potatoes. So there are lots of ways to help balance our blood sugar and still taste super, super good. Okay, so the other technique that has transformed my life, and I want to teach you this because it's something you can do in those few seconds you might even have between patients, or you might be on a phone call and you feel like you've stopped breathing, right? So if you could put one hand on your abdomen and then one on your chest, and just sit back in your chair. I'm sure you've heard about this, but it would be really helpful just to practice abdominal breathing. Now, the idea is that this hand's not going to move, your chest is not going to move. The whole abdominal breathing is actually when we're actually allowed to let our stomach out. We breathe in and our abdomen pops out. Breathe in through the nose and out through the pursed lips. The abdomen, the diaphragm, what we're doing here is we're engaging the vagus nerve. You might even get lightheaded with this, because the vagus nerve, it's called the wandering nerve, is engaging every visceral. And you've been sitting here a lot today, probably not focused much on your breathing. And when you actually start to let your stomach out and take a big abdominal breath and then let it out, you're oxygenating your entire body. It engages the parasympathetic system instantly and will bring down the stress response. And you can do that anywhere, anytime. And you don't actually have to put your hand here and here. People don't have to know you're doing it. And I love it. It's a good excuse that we can actually let our stomach out. And the bigger, the better, because we're oxygenating our whole tissue and then letting it in, so our diaphragm is actually being engaged, because we do so much shallow breathing. And that's a really cool, quick stress response. It also allows the gut to relax, because of the enteric nervous system. When we're in the fight or flight response, what does the gut do? It engages too. So thinking about engaging that in a very simple and quick way. And this vagus nerve is absolutely amazing. It's our rest and digest nerve, and it tells our body to relax. So we want to tighten our vagal tone by doing that diaphragmatic breathing. And I wanted to bring that to you today. I could do it, like, wouldn't it be lovely if for 20 minutes we could just do diaphragmatic breathing? But since I'm speaking at the end of the day, probably not a good idea. I'll put you all to sleep because it's so relaxing. And you might get lightheaded just because the oxygen is coming through your body quickly. Okay, number 4, we're doing very well with time. Number 4, adding probiotics. Does anyone have probiotic foods? Anyone add probiotic foods? Do you like sauerkraut? Sauerkraut, fabulous probiotic food. And I'm going to talk about the microbiome in a bit. But kefir, kombucha, I know it's, for a lot of people, it's not something that they think about a lot. I went to a class once and I couldn't believe how easy it was to make sauerkraut. You just get a cabbage and you get some Himalayan salt and you just massage the salt into the cabbage and it becomes liquidy, and then you get one of those jars with a tight lid and tighten it. You got to put a little hole in the top because it's going to bubble, 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 bubble. It's so easy to make sauerkraut. Or buy it at Trader Joe's. Might be easier. But that will help. It's also a prebiotic and a probiotic. Now, why do we need probiotics? I am a big believer in probiotics. Probiotic foods and supplemental probiotics. Because our gut has been through a lot in our life. And sleep deprivation hugely impacts our microbiome. Stress, age, illness, antibiotic use in our lifetime, poor diet, poor hydration, these all impact our microbiome and environmental toxins. And even if you were to eat really purely organic, we are still exposed to a lot of environmental toxins that are impacting our microbiome. And I want to talk to you about our microbiome because this, to me, in the work that I do in nutritional science, is one of the greatest new discoveries. It's like I never talked about the microbiome in medical school. It's like a new organ. It's actually an organ. And did you know that we're actually only 25% human? I'm not sure if you get this training in the work that you do, but 67% of our cells are actually bacterial and 8% are fungal. And you remember the germ theory? Like, we're really familiar with the germ theory that every germ is bad and we've got to have this antiseptic environment. And of course, in some cases, that's essential. And in our life, it's turned out that we need these commensal microbes for every function of our body. And it's this collective community, I call it like a rainforest, that is inside of us and has been decreased from all of those lifestyle factors, our microbiome. And the genes of our microbiome are now becoming major implicators in every kind of illness. So we talk about genomics, the human genome, but now the microbiome genome is being considered in connection with illness. Every area of medicine is talking about the microbiome. So I have this picture, like, are we really human? Like, this is a whole new discovery from when we were trained, when I was trained. And it's so exciting. This is just one study that looks at how our belly bacteria influence our brain and how it may influence a variety of factors in mental health. So in neurology and psychiatry, they're looking at the microbiome. And to this day, we can't say what an ideal microbiome is. We're still in research. But what we can say is it has to be diverse. Like a rainforest, you need all of the diversity. So the more diverse the microbiome, the healthier it is. So this little brain in our innards, in connection with the brain in our head, partly determines our mental state and plays key roles in every disease. So I hope that you'll really give your gut, your digestive system, a lot of attention when you are taking care of you. And know that these microbes that live inside of you are super important. And you're probably hearing about fecal transplants. They do them a lot in Europe now. They do somewhat in the United States, but it's much more popular in Europe. And C-section babies, the baby doesn't get the inoculation of the microbiome coming down the vaginal canal, so they're taking the vaginal secretions and putting it on the baby's skin and in their mouth, in their ears, because that first inoculation is so important to your overall immune system. So we're making shifts and changes in medicine. Now, I did want to remind you, well, that says org at the end. If you want to know more, because my time with you is so limited today, I just wrote, just this year, 50-page ebook on your gut matters and your second brain. It's beautifully illustrated, talks about the microbiome and mental health. You can just go to my website, drkarenwolfe.org, and it is free for you. It's a beautiful, beautiful ebook. Okay, so winding down, number 5 is exercise. Exercise is a potent antidepressant. Maybe we talk We talked about that link between exercise and serotonin. It also helps with insulin sensitivity. It helps our insulin receptors work better, amongst many other things. So moving your body and making a commitment. If you have a little Apple Watch or some kind of Fitbit device so that you can keep yourself accountable to how many steps. And I know you must move a lot of steps every day because you're on your feet. And that exercise is just as helpful. In fact, it's more helpful. So the American College of Sports Medicine now is saying that moving all day like you are is more beneficial than going to the gym for an hour and pounding it and then sitting for the rest of the day. That's great news. It's really good news. So there's something positive that I shared with you today. And they have a thing now called sitting is the new smoking. People that just sit all day, their risk factors are showing up as hugely impactful for their health. So have a little tracker, and if you don't have a tracker, get one, because you must move, I'd say, 20, 30,000 steps a day, I bet, if you're on your feet all day, which is amazing. Because you're moving, your body, our body is a system that needs to be moving all the time. And then water. I have to say, this is my hardest one. It's always has been, getting enough water. And especially, you know, if you have to go and pee all the time, it gets kind of inconvenienced. But we know for your digestive system and your overall system, you need to be drinking half your body weight in ounces of water. And with a minimum of 80. So if you're only 100 pounds, you still need to drink 80 ounces of water. And some tips, you know those diffusers? They've changed my life, that I can actually put nice flavored cucumber and orange slices and limes and lemons to make it taste better, and then to keep refilling your water bottle, and also to eat your water. You know, a lot of these veggies like cucumbers, they're 95% water. So that counts too. So get your water, it's so, so important. And my final tip, and maybe my most important one, is to receive support, because the work you do is giving, giving, giving. And I want you to put this high on your list of to-dos for yourself. And I love dogs, so I just love pictures of dogs. But look at this. The research is showing us that social relationships, or lack thereof, constitute a major risk factor for health, as high as cigarette smoking, obesity, high blood pressure. And the book Reversing Heart Disease by Dean Ornish, remember that long time ago that he wrote that book? He did a follow-up book called Love and Survival that documents research about the healing power of love. And it's an amazing book, one of my favorites, because it actually talks about love as an entity for us to focus on. And I don't mean this kind of social connections, because this is pretty concerning when we're starting to see disconnection. We need to hold each other up. And I know you probably have such great friends that you work with, you understand the stresses of your particular job, and you know to go to each other and to hold each other up. And I wanted to give you a resource. Have you heard of Brené Brown? Brené Brown. If you haven't, Brené, I know B-R-E-N-E, Brené Brown. She is a research scientist, and she has done social science work and studying on courage and empathy and shame and bravery. And some of her books are listed up here: The Power of Vulnerability, The Gifts of Imperfection. She's just a beautiful speaker and writer. And she has I came across her work. I just love, it's very inspiring to just read about vulnerability and empathy. And she has a very short little video, it's just 3 minutes long, you might have seen it, that gives us a contrast between empathy and sympathy. And in today's world, especially what happened just a couple of days ago up just north of us, when we don't know how to support someone in difficult times, this short little video was just so inspiring to me that I wanted to share it with you.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Isn't that beautiful? And that's Brené Brown. She was actually that was her voice that was giving that. And for me, I'm very blessed to have a family and my dogs, Jeannie and Max, to just give me unconditional love. And I just feel like dogs, they just know. They just witness to us. And they're there, they're present. And I want to finish today by acknowledging something in you, which is your courage to show up every day. And it's probably easy to take for granted the work you do. My husband is with me and does not have a medical background, and to see this work that you do right here and to just be in awe of what you do and how you show up. And I hope you realize that you are meeting a deep need in the world that Parker Palmer talks about. And the word courage in French comes from heart, la coeur. And in sign language, the sign for courage is the same as the sign for brave, which is the same as the sign for health. And I want to finish today with a gift to you. And one of my good friends, Janice Stanfield, I switched that up. Janice Stanfield, she writes heavy mental music. And I have a song for you that I'm going to sign for you today to just acknowledge the courage that you have, that you show up every day and make a huge difference in the world. So.
You don't have to feel brave to be brave. I don't have to feel strong to be strong. We don't have to feel inspiring to inspire. Remember when your road is rough and long, even a small star shines in the darkness. someone somewhere to see. It lights the way for those in the distance. That's what your courage means to me. Maybe there are times you feel lonely, like no one sees the world the way you do. Remember, each of us is made uniquely, and no one ever sees their own magnitude. Even a small star shines in the darkness for someone somewhere to see. It lights the way for those in the distance. That's what your courage means to me. So don't be afraid to be a little brilliant. Don't be afraid to shine in someone's eyes. If we can trust the gifts that sometimes make us different, then we can all learn to shine, shine, shine. Even a small star shines in the darkness for someone somewhere to see. It lights the way for those in the distance. That's what your courage